I think there might be some folks that, if you need a chair, sir, we can give you a chair if you'd like to have a seat. Others may be able to give seats to those who may need them. Some of our members are willing to stand. So there is a lot of information in the back from our speakers that you can take to Mary Holbein. And thank you again for being here.
Excuse me. I'd just like to take a minute to introduce our new members.
Oh, okay.
We have a lot of them. We're just delighted. We have, and I think we have some people joining tonight, which you will not be on this list, but I'll welcome you next time.
I'd like to thank you all for coming, and thank you in advance for coming out of your comfort zone, because this is a difficult topic. We're focusing on domestic trafficking, local, and particularly on children. Now, many people think of this as a third world problem or an inner city problem or only foreign women and children, but I can assure you that isn't true. I've got a couple of newspaper quotes, or just little things. January of last year, there were 2 men who were accused of forcing females into prostitution. This is from the Daily Herald. They provided women and girls cell phones and directed them to answer calls and schedule meetings with Backpage.com customers. The meetings occurred in motels in suburbs, including Schaumburg, Naperville, Downers Grove, Lansing, Harvey, Alsip, and Joliet. In June of last year, a man from Bolingbrook was arrested. He chose his victims carefully, preying on weak and vulnerable girls at homeless shelters, crack houses, and rehab centers. And he stalked the streets, befriending runaways and telling them they were beautiful and promising them lucrative careers as models. Same day, Naperville Sun, Benjamin Biancafiore will traffic women out of his home in Naperville, kept them in line with brutal force. And he advertised women by posting nude and semi-nude photos of them on classified websites like Craigslist and Backpage. Just last week, there was a press release from the Cook County Sheriff Tom Dark. Law enforcement agencies in 15 different states participated in sex trafficking sting for several weeks up to and including the Super Bowl weekend. They concentrated on the buyers, which we impolitely refer to as Johns. And across these 15 states, they arrested more than 700 Johns and 29 traffickers. 5 of the Johns were arrested by the Arlington Heights Police Force and 101 by the Cook County Sheriff's Office. Just the day before yesterday, there was an article in the Daily Herald that a man in Barrington was arrested in the middle of the night with a 13-year-old girl in his car, and he was charged with child pornography and sexual assault. So it is here, my friends, and it is our problem. And let's hope we can learn about it and do something about it. And we have some wonderful speakers here who will help us learn. We have Eric Nelson here. He is the head of Administered Justice, Executive Director, and he joined in 2013. And this is a non-profit, Christ-centered legal aid organization. It provides free legal services to low-income individuals. And among the legal services includes something called At Last. This means Attorneys Targeting Labor and Sex Trafficking. He had spent 21 years as directing attorney with the Pine Street Legal Assistance in Maine, supervising the farm worker and Native American units, and also a low-income taxpayer clinic and employee law project. And while there, he co-counseled a labor trafficking case in federal court. Worked for 6 years as staff attorney for Main Street Employees Association, Local 1989, SEIU, and he grew up in the Boston area, but he graduated from North Park College in Chicago. And after college, he worked as a community organizer in the Albany Park area of Chicago. He obtained his law degree from Northeastern University School of Law in Boston. And over here we have Sergeant Rich Hawkins, and he's worked in law enforcement with the DuPage County Sheriff's Office for more than 20 years. He worked in Corrections Patrol, and he's currently in the Detective Division. He supervises a special response team that concentrates their efforts on suppressing illegal activity involving gangs, guns, narcotics, and prostitutions. And additionally, he's a certified firearms instructor and an FBI certified bond technician. He graduated from NIU with a bachelor's degree in technology and also is a graduate of Northwestern University School of Police Staff and Command. Frank Massolini, I could talk about for a year. He is the director of Salvation Army's Promise Program, and this stands for Partnership to Rescue Our Minors from Sexual Exploitation. He is the founder of Ann's House, and this is a trauma-informed care residential treatment center for young women, trafficking victims. It opened in 2010, and it is the first in Illinois to be a privately funded long-term trauma-based residential home for victims of commercial sexual exploitation. After he retired from his usual job, he went on as a full-time volunteer for the Salvation Army and helped them gain a $1 million grant from the Department of Justice, and this is used to create a comprehensive curriculum to deal with trafficking and the commercial exploitation of children. And this program has been used to train over 20,000 law enforcement, mental health, medical and social service providers in 5 major cities across the U.S. So there's 4 initiatives that he works with on his task force: increasing public awareness and the training that I just talked about, preventing this sexual exploitation from occurring by training middle and high school students with a human trafficking curriculum, and working with law enforcement and hotel operators to identify when this is going on, and opening Ann's House. And he also has opened an anti-trafficking coalition in Elgin, and he's starting another one in Libertyville. What more can I say? There is more, but that's plenty. So I'm going to turn it over now to Eric Nelson.
Thanks, Mary. I just want to start by, well, first of all, I should start by saying there's now a vacant seat up here. If somebody wants to take that. I just want to start by applauding the League for hosting this event and for its strong statement about human trafficking. As Mary mentioned, human trafficking is increasing. It's increasing in the suburban areas like this area in Downers Grove, both labor and sex trafficking. And raising awareness is really a first step and a huge step towards addressing the issue. The main topic tonight is sex trafficking. Let me just very briefly mention labor trafficking, because that's a huge issue as well and probably is worthy of a separate evening. And regarding labor trafficking, I just encourage you to kind of think outside of the box, because let me just list some jobs where victims of labor trafficking have been identified. Now, this isn't to say that all these jobs always involve people that have been trafficked, but these are jobs you should keep your eyes open about. Farm workers, landscapers, snow removers, domestic servants, nannies, people, usually kids, selling door-to-door magazines, hair braiding, nail salons, hotel maids, panhandlers, car washes, carnivals, and factory workers. All of those vocations have had incidences of labor trafficking, some fairly frequently. Let's just start with the legal definition. Legal definition of sex trafficking is when a commercial sexual act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion. Now, sex trafficking, unlike what the name perhaps implies, does not require the element of transportation across either country lines or state lines. Child sex trafficking, under the age of 18, there's no need to prove force, fraud, or coercion. Sex trafficking is the fastest growing business of organized crime, the 3rd largest criminal activity in the world. One of our banquet speakers a couple years ago, his nickname is Pastor Choco. He is the pastor of New Life Covenant Church in Humboldt Park, and they have a very active anti-trafficking effort in that church. They have housing for victims. And one of the things he said, which really has stuck with me since that evening, he said, no girl grows up dreaming to be a prostitute. Something terribly wrong happened. Something broke in her life to cause that result. And oftentimes that something has occurred at home. So my charge tonight is to just give you an overview of the laws addressing human trafficking. I'll start with a few federal laws and then really zero in on some of the Illinois laws that have been passed to address human trafficking, particularly sex trafficking. And there's a list at least of those on the back table, so you can, if you'd like to, take them on the way out. So let's start with the federal laws. In year 2000, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act was passed. And that's basically the first comprehensive federal law to address trafficking in terms of defining, prosecuting, and providing services. So really it deals a lot with awareness, it deals a lot with prosecution, and it provided for both Department of Justice and FBI task forces to focus on human trafficking. Also provides for certain types of visas for victims of trafficking who are immigrants in this country to allow them to get legal status. Both a T visa and a U visa can often be used, but I won't go into detail about those. Now, survivors of human trafficking under this federal act, survivors can file a private civil lawsuit against anyone who could be held criminally liable for their trafficking. That's a key component. Mary mentioned a case that I have been involved in New England under the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. But there's a recent case, just to highlight something that just came down from the courts fairly recently, and it was against Backpage.com. Jane Doe's, there was actually 3 young women that sued Backpage.com, lost in the federal district court. The case was appealed to the First Circuit Court of Appeals. They sued under the Trafficking Victims Prevention Act, and the court found that Congress had granted broad protections to internet publishers under another federal statute called the Communications Decency Act, and upheld the district court's dismissal. Let me just read from the First Circuit Court of Appeals opinion, the very introduction by Circuit Judge Selya. This is a hard case. Hard not in the sense that the legal issues defy resolution, but hard in the sense that the law requires that we, like the court below, deny relief to plaintiffs whose circumstances evoke outrage. And in the conclusion, if the evils that the appellants, those are the victims, have identified are deemed to outweigh the First Amendment values that drive the Communication Decency Act, the remedy is through legislation, not through litigation. The Supreme Court just last month denied review of that case. So the law stands as written by the First Circuit. Interestingly, though, that same day the Supreme Court denied review, Backpage.com closed its, quote, adult advertising section. That was the day before they were set to appear before a Senate subcommittee and explain the actions that they were taking on Backpage. Let me quote one other thing, because Nicholas Kristof, this was an article sent to me by Mary, or referenced by Mary. Nicholas Kristof is an op-ed columnist for the New York Times. So he wrote, we need Congress, this is his opinion, we need Congress to amend the Communications Decency Act to clarify that companies like Backpage don't get protections when they permit pimps to sell kids on their websites. There is a mounting bipartisan effort to push such an amendment, and I hope President-elect Donald Trump will show leadership on this as well. That's Nicholas Kristof. So the courts found against the plaintiffs, against the appellants, and so the action then goes to the legislature to see what will happen next. 2 other federal statutes. In 2003, the acronym, the PROTECT Act, was passed. It's prosecutorial remedies and other tools to end the exploitation of children. 2 of the key pieces of that were that it made it a crime to travel abroad to engage in sexual conduct with minors, and it created standards and grant funds to expand the state Amber Alert systems. That's a system to help find kids that have been taken. And lastly, in terms of the federal law, 2015, the Justice for Victims of Trafficking Act was passed, and amongst those provisions, it defined child pornography as a form of trafficking. The Federal Department of Justice also has an Internet Crimes Against Children task force. Let me just read you from their website. It's a national network of 61 coordinated task forces representing 3,500 federal, state, and local law enforcement and prosecutorial agencies, increasing the capacity of thousands of communities across the country to combat child sexual exploitation and internet crimes against children. The program was developed in response to the increasing number of children and teenagers using the internet, the proliferation of child sexual abuse images available electronically, and heightened online activity by predators. There's an Illinois Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force through the Attorney General's office. Let me just also note, before I move on to Illinois, there's a project called the Alicia Project, and this would reference you to check their website. But one of the things that they're trying to promote in all 50 states is a law that would provide a dedicated, because oftentimes revenue is the issue, right? Revenue and resources. Provide a dedicated, steady stream of state-specific funding to the Internet Crimes Against Children task forces around the country. So two examples you can see on their website. They work with the state of Kentucky to provide money for the Kentucky Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, additional money coming from a $10 court fee on all felonies and misdemeanors. And in the state of Washington, Alicia's law there uses unclaimed lottery prize money to fund child exploitation investigations and will allocate up to $2 million every 2 years to Washington's branch of Internet Crimes Against Children. And additionally, there will be a $1,000 fine per image or video containing child pornography. And then lastly, in terms of the federal legislation, there's pending H.R. 466, which is the Sex Trafficking Demand Reduction Act. So let's focus on Illinois, and let me just go through some of the different statutes that have been passed. I'll do it chronologically. Frank and I were talking just before about Illinois really having a lot to be proud of in terms of state law that's been enacted. In fact, there's a group called the Polaris Project, and their job is really to rate where states are at in terms of human trafficking laws and in terms of providing resources for victims. They help states, they work with organizations to promote legislation, to draft legislation, and they rate states in terms of how well they're doing. Illinois has a Tier 1 rating along with 38 other states regarding human trafficking laws that have been passed, and a Tier 1 rating along with 11 other states regarding the victims' assistance laws that have been passed. So let me just walk through these or talk through these for just a few minutes. In 2006, Illinois passed the Trafficking of Persons and Involuntary Servitude Act, and that amended the criminal code by adding the statutory definition of human trafficking. So that was really the start in Illinois. In 2006, the legislature passed the Illinois Predator Accountability Act. That provides survivors of sex trafficking a civil remedy to sue traffickers and others who have financially benefited from their forced prostitution to reclaim money. In 2007, Illinois passed the First Offender Felony Prostitution Act, and that allows adults being charged with felony prostitution to be placed on probation if they had no prior felony prostitution charges. That was in 2007. Then Illinois really stepped it up in 2010 with the Illinois Safe Children's Act. Let me just read some of those provisions. Illinois was the first state in the nation, through this act, to make all children under the age of 18 immune from prosecution for prostitution, under any circumstances. Whoops. Touching a keyboard here. Basically because minors were deemed unable to consent to their own commercial sexual exploitation. Reasonable. And if a child exploited in prostitution is encountered by law enforcement, she or he may be taken into temporary protective custody, and law enforcement must notify DCFS, which in turn must initiate an investigation into child abuse within 24 hours. Another portion of that bill expanded law enforcement's ability to engage in wiretapping during investigations into human trafficking crimes. Similar, and I think it was probably a companion piece of legislation, in 2010 there was an amendment to the Juvenile Court Act, which identifies all minors forced to engage in prostitution or commercial sex by a parent, guardian, or other individual living in their household as being abused. And that's obviously responding to a problem, a big problem. The problem being that oftentimes the perpetrator is within the household. So it identifies all minors forced to engage in prostitution or commercial sex by a parent, guardian, or other individual living in their household as abused may then be taken into temporary custody and the abuse reported to DCFS. In 2012, Illinois passed a law in which any vehicle used in the commission of a prostitution or trafficking offense may be towed and impounded. The owner fined $1,000. Half of it goes to law enforcement, and the other $500 goes to the Illinois Department of Human Services for a special fund to make grants to provide services for victims of human trafficking. In 2012, Illinois passed the Justice for Victims of Sex Trafficking Crimes Act. We became the third state in the nation to pass a law to enable victims of sex trafficking to clear their records of prostitution convictions if the conviction occurred while the individual was a victim of trafficking. And there's no time limit for seeking that relief. That's obviously a great benefit to victims because you can imagine the difficulty in finding employment, perhaps even finding housing, if they have a prostitution felony conviction on their record. And that 2012 legislation really represented what is safe to call a paradigm shift from one that treats sex trafficked victims as criminals to one that recognizes them as crime victims. And I go back to my quote from Pastor Choco. You know, no girl grows up dreaming to be a prostitute. They are victimized. They are victims. And the law now in Illinois and increasingly in most other states recognizes them as such appropriately. In 2012, Illinois passed the Human Trafficking Limitations Act. I'm going to go through these a little quicker now just because of time. In 2013, Illinois passed a law that eliminates felony level charges for prostitution. Now they were deemed a misdemeanor, and also created a mental health court program option for prostituted women. In 2014, a law was passed to reallocate criminal fines and fees from pimps, traffickers, and people who buy sex to fund specialized services for survivors of human trafficking. That fund is managed by DHS. Provides opportunities for grants to non-governmental organizations and for funding for drop-in centers, emergency housing, and long-term safe homes. Last I heard, there wasn't very much money in that fund. I'm not sure, given the state budget, that situation's improved. Maybe Frank can shed some light on that, or one of the other speakers, I'm not sure. 2015, the criminal code was amended to allow individuals charged with prostitution to offer an affirmative defense to prove that their act of prostitution was a result of human trafficking. In other words, explaining in response to the charge against them that they were being trafficked. And also, this was at least according to the Traffic Free website, this was the first time in the country where, when raising the affirmative defense, they could request what's called an in-camera court proceeding, which basically means it goes into chambers, it's private, and nobody's going to be observing or hearing what the victim's testifying to, because obviously there could be serious repercussions and retaliation against the victim. 2015, Cook County established the Chicago Prostitution and Trafficking Intervention Court, again along the lines of the theme of being victims, not criminals, and it's a treatment alternative to incarceration and provides access to trauma-informed services. In 2016, so we're starting to get current here, 2016, actually several pieces of legislation effective 2016, the Human Trafficking Resource Center Notice Act was passed. Requires a notice regarding human trafficking to be posted in certain establishments. I'll give you an example of a few of those. Any premise where the sale of alcohol is the principal business, any adult entertainment facility, primary airports, passenger rail or light rail stations, bus stations, truck stops, emergency rooms, urgent care centers, farm labor contractors, and privately owned job recruitment centers, among them. The Illinois Department of Health and Human Services was charged with creating the model notice, and there's a copy of it back on the table. Looks like this is in English and Spanish. And I made copies partly so that you'd all have access to the toll-free line for the National Human Trafficking Resource Center. That was also amended recently to be effective in July to add to the list hotels and motels. 2016, the Public Awareness of the National Hotline Number Act was passed, and so DHS is to cooperate with the Department of Transportation to promote public awareness of the National Human Trafficking Hotline, including signs in high-risk areas such as truck stops, bus stations, train stations. So really similar to that other piece of legislation, but really requiring DOT and DHS to work together to make it happen. Two more. The Human Trafficking Task Force Act was passed in 2016. I won't read who all is on the task force, but they are charged with conducting a study of the human trafficking problem in this state, developing a state plan to address it, implementing a system for the sharing of human trafficking data between government agencies, establishing policies to enable state government to work with non-governmental organizations and other elements of the private sector to prevent human trafficking, and to provide assistance to victims of human trafficking who are United States citizens or foreign nationals, increase public awareness, develop methods for protecting the rights of victims, evaluating the necessity of treating victims of human trafficking as crime victims rather than criminals, and developing methods for promoting the safety of victims of human trafficking. And they are charged with issuing a report to the legislature on or before June 30th, 2017, which is coming right up. Lastly, in terms of state law, also passed in 2016, but not effective until January 1, 2018, is the Survivor Support and Trafficking Prevention Act. Provides state-funded services, including SNAP, the old food stamp program, TANF, and Medicaid, to foreign-born survivors of trafficking, torture, and other crimes. Really, that provided a provision of those services during the gap period when they would otherwise not be eligible for federal programs, and the state of Illinois stepped in very importantly to provide services during that window of time. Let me just conclude. Municipal ordinances, there are increasing efforts, I'm not going to list any, there are increasing efforts on the local level, the very local level, to fight human trafficking through local ordinances, making it harder for trafficking to remain a financially viable option. In fact, the city of Houston is referred to as a prime example of a successful enactment of ordinances passed with the support of legitimate spa businesses. Let me just conclude with a couple other points. One is really a quote, but it's kind of an obvious one, the need for resources. So it isn't legislation necessarily that's lacking to protect victims, but rather the resources to make laws like I just spoke about a reality. Challenges include a lack of housing for victims, disparate responses from authorities, and the victim's general distrust of law enforcement. So the Polaris project talks about the following regarding victim assistance. The ideal statute would ensure that state agencies develop and implement a comprehensive and cohesive plan to provide victims with assistance securing critical services, including but not limited to housing, food and medical, psychological, legal, employment, educational, and immigration services. The ideal statute would also ensure the effectiveness of these programs by establishing a caseworker privilege and guaranteeing necessary funding. And so I just want to conclude, or maybe I already said I was going to conclude, but I'm going to conclude with my second conclusion, maybe a third conclusion. And not to at all take away from Frank's presentation, because his is huge. The issue of housing for victims is huge. I mean, it's simply huge. And I'm going to quote an Ann's House report. There are only a few homes in existence in the United States that provide comprehensive long-term therapeutic trauma treatment, because that's what's needed. Long-term therapeutic trauma treatment to young women and girls who are victims of sex trafficking. And the estimate at the time, and maybe Frank's going to update this, but the average recovery time is 1.5 to 2 years due to the nature of the severity of the trauma. And indeed, victims are here, and thankfully there are some organizations stepping up to provide housing for victims. In addition to the Ann's House and the great work that Frank is doing, I mentioned Pastor Choco, the Chicago Dream Center, about 3 hours west of here. Specific locations are never really given. There's Reclaim 13 that some of you are familiar with offices in Cassandra's in Downers Grove. They have housing for very young girls. That's the name Reclaim 13, kind of let's reclaim those ages that have been taken away. Refuge for Women just opened a house in July in McHenry County. And Moody Bible Church just opened Naomi's house in West Chicago. So those are all efforts for organizations, where churches, where organizations are coming together to provide that necessary housing. And this will be my last conclusion, because I want to just quote, and I call this the victim's cry. And it's a quote from Psalm 35, verses 4 to 8. So if I may just quote this. Let those be put to shame and brought to dishonor who seek after my life. Let those be turned back and brought to confusion who plot my hurt. Let them be like chaff before the wind, and let the angel of the Lord chase them. Let their way be dark and slippery, and let the angel of the Lord pursue them. For without cause they have hidden their net for me in a pit, which they have dug without cause for my life. Let destruction come upon him unexpectedly, and let the net that he has hidden catch himself. Into that very destruction let him fall. In Psalm 40, deliver me, O Lord, from evil men. Preserve me from violent men who plan evil things in their hearts. Thank you.
Sorry, oh, are you shut off? Okay. I should explain. We have some undercover agents here, so they do not want to be on.
Speak louder.
We have some undercover agents here who do not want to be on film for obvious reasons. So we got to deal with the camera. Okay, go
It's
ahead.
on, I have it pointed up there, so
Okay.
you're not on
You
camera.
recorded it all?
Yeah.
Audio? Okay.
Audio's okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Hi.
Hi.
I don't have what he's got, so everybody just sit back and relax. Okay? But the nice thing is, if that's not on, then I can kind of like move around the room. Right?
Yes.
And I can chat behind this. Okay? So we're going to talk briefly. You need to kind of understand where I'm coming from, okay? My name's Sergeant Rich Hawkins. I'm with the DuPage County Sheriff's Office. Been there like 20 years, okay? And what I currently do is I run a unit. I have like 3 guys. I have exactly 3 guys, not like 3 guys. I have 3 guys that work for me, okay? Very good detectives. And basically what we do is we chase down gangbangers, okay? And we chase down drugs, right? Heroin is pretty big in the news, right? We chase down some prostitution, okay? And we go out looking for guns. All right, so we have like all the main food groups in there. So like I said, it's me and I have 3 guys. And now I have a counterpart sergeant that works when I'm not working, okay? I work 4 days a week, 10 hours a day, and then we overlap on Fridays, right? So there's another sergeant out there, and he's got 3 guys too, okay? And their group concentrates on exactly the same thing, right? Guns, gangs, drugs, prostitution, okay? So let's think about this, right? How many square miles is DuPage County?
Oh, yeah.
I don't even know. I don't know. It's big, right? It's pretty big, right? And I think you know where I'm going with this math, right? Okay? Because we're talking about 8 guys, right? 8 guys, and this is our main focus. And we have DuPage County here. Now, granted, it's nowhere near as big as Cook County, right? And we don't have as many residents as Cook County. We only have 1 million. Right? There's only 965,000, so that way you can't go to home rule or something like that, right? Right? It's like, oh no, don't say 1 million. We don't want to say 1 million, right? So we have just under 1 million people, right? And just in the unincorporated areas, we have about 150,000. So we got 8 guys looking into 150,000 people who are out there. I mean, most people are good, right? Right? So let's not worry about like 80% of them. Let's just worry about 20% of them, right? And out of those 20% of them, come on, really? Some of them are just goofs, right? I mean, they just get into trouble because they just don't have that voice in the back of their head. It just says, don't do it, it's not a good idea, right? But then there's, right? But then there's that small percentage, right? What are they?
Predators.
Who said it? A++ smiley face. Now you guys aren't getting held back like late, right? You get out early today. She got it. They're predators, right? And I don't mean like predator, like sexual predator, like, you know, like there's this age difference here, and then, you know, we're going to penetrate with a sexual organ, and, you know, this law and that law. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is that predatory state of mind, right? It's mine now. You can't do anything about it, right? You want to fight me? You want to fight me? This is what'll happen. 2 hits. Me hitting you, and you hitting the floor. Predatory. It's predatory, right? I get to do what I want to do because in my mind, that's the way I think, right?
Because
You can probably whip my ass some. So I carry all this stuff, right? But there's that segment of society, and that's what they are. They're predatory, right? And they prey on other people, okay? Like you said, nobody grows up thinking, man, I want to be a prostitute. I'm going to turn tricks 20 a day if I can. Nobody ever says that. Just like nobody ever says, I want to grow up and be a heroin addict, right? Some of them grow up saying, I want to be a Latin king. I want to be a vice lord like my dad. Right? I want to be a Latin count like my older brother. Right? They develop that kind of mindset somewhere along the line. Some people do that. Some people just, that's the way their head works, right? Okay, so we got 8 guys, right? And this is the thing that we're tasked with, right? So without getting into like a whole bunch of political, like, hey, we need more money, or we need more people, or we need more squad cars, or whatever. I'm not going to get into that at all. But you can see the monumental task that is set before us, right? It's big, right? So this is what we go out and do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just talk briefly a little bit about just the nuts and bolts of what it takes to get something like this off the ground, right? And when we do these cases, it's like for a prostitution case, or like we'll call it a spa case. Like the main ones are spa cases, and then we have escort cases, right? Spa case, I mean, it is what it is, right? Like I can name, and I won't do it, I can name 3 places right now within 5 miles of where we're all standing that are operating spas, and there's prostitution going on in there. I can't prove it, but I know it. There's a difference, right? Fortunately, you know, this is America, so we need proof, right? So you can't just go in guns blazing and throw everybody to the floor. That would not go well, right? So we have spa cases, and then we have escort cases. All right, escort cases are a little different, right? We're making a date. Baby, you're beautiful. I love your pictures on Backpage. Oh, but that's okay. They shut down Backpage, the adults only section, so everybody just moved their ads over to personals. So you can still find them, right? So go over to the personals. That's where you'll find the dates, right? So we got these 2 cases, right? We got spa cases, we got escorts, right? Spa cases, they're pretty easy, okay? Only problem is, how many spas do we have in DuPage County? I guarantee you, if they're in unincorporated, probably some bad stuff going on there, all right? Because they love to, these spas love to gravitate towards unincorporated because the licensing isn't as strict as it is like if you want to open up a spa like in downtown Naperville. You go to downtown Naperville, are there any spas there? You can go in and just get a rub down, right? Like on Jefferson, next to the Sugar Monkey cupcake place, right? Is there?
No, I've been to Sugar Monkey.
Right. It's great, isn't it? No, you don't find that there, right? Where do you find it? You find it over in Keeneyville on Lake Street, right? And it's just one example. And I'm not saying, oh, Keeneyville's bad. I'm not trying to dish on any one particular town, right? But there's a lot of spas out there, right? So what are we going to do? We're just going to start going in and just throwing money at all these spas, right? $100 here, $200 there. See what happens, right? Who's got the manpower for that? Not me, right? Not me. And sooner or later, you know, I mean, that money's got to come from somewhere, right? I don't have a money tree in my office. Just shake it. Well, hey, I got the money. Let's go do a spot case, right? Right? I don't have a money tree. Nobody's got a money tree. Yeah, no, nobody's got it. So what do? Well, you know what? Maybe we get some information from somebody, right? Maybe we take somebody off. We arrest somebody, right? Maybe a heroin pinch or something like that, and like, hey man, I got some information for you. I know that there's this spot working down in the southeast corner of the county, which I will not say their name, because we're going to go and we're going to hit them again. And I did say again. Okay. You go in there, $100, you get taken care of. No problem. You got to go in 2 or 3 times though, so that way they know you. But then you're good. You're in. Okay, cool, right? That, yeah. Okay, now we got actionable intel. We'll work on that, right? We just can't like start throwing darts at the wall, and, you know, right? I mean, we probably get something out of that either way. These girls that work in there, some of them want to be there. They want to be there in the sense that, hey, I got a car payment. I got to feed my babies. I got to make rent. Like you said, nobody grows up wanting to be a prostitute. Nobody. Something broke, seriously, years before to get you to that spot to do that, right? So we go in there and we do the case, throw the money down, she agrees, we arrest her, right? Is she a victim or is she a suspect? We just arrested her. For what? Prostitution, misdemeanor prostitution, right? Is she a victim or is she a suspect? It's a quandary, right? She needs to pay rent. She's got babies. She shouldn't support her family. This is the only thing that she knows how to do. She never finished school, right? She didn't have college. She gotta make that car payment, man. What do? That's a tough situation to be in, right? Is she a victim or is she a suspect? Well, she's a suspect now. Maybe we can make her a victim, right? Escort cases, right? Maybe we get some information. A particular case that we were working that kind of fell off. It was actually right when Backpage went down, the adult section, and she did not move her head over to personal, so we just lost her. We actually found out her real identity. Like you go up on these ads, and they've all got like stage names, right? Like the one girl from Rockford that we just took off, London 40 Triple D. Figure it out. Okay. So we do these, you know, so we figure out who she is, right? So we're like, all right, this is good, because now we actually have a little bit of intel. We're not just going in blind, because that's not something that I want to do with my guys. I don't want to send them in someplace blind where, you know, we're in a situation where we don't have any control, right? If I send my guy into this girl's apartment, how do I know that there's not dudes in there waiting for him to roll him, to rip him off, right? Because that happens a lot too. She have weapons offenses? She have a warrant for murder in Indiana? Because she murdered some dude, now she's going to roll this guy and do him too? My detective, right? That's a tough decision for me to make, to send my guy in there and do that, right? All right, let's try to do this at a hotel or something, you know? We have a couple options. We can minimize our liability, or I should say, we can minimize our risk, you know? It's not about risk avoidance. I was actually telling my bosses that. We're not in the business of avoiding risk. We're in the business of managing it and minimizing it, because we still have a tough job to do. So same deal now, right? So we arrest her for prostitution. Is she a suspect or is she a victim? Does she really want to be there? You gotta pay the rent. You gotta live somewhere, right? You gotta live in your car. Right? Is she a suspect or is she a victim? We make these arrests, and we sit down with them, and we talk to them, we try to figure them out, right? And then that's she's a special agent with Department of Homeland Security, okay? She actually is in a group where they focus on trafficking, okay? No pictures of her,
Although I'm
She's-
awesome, but
She's
yeah.
very beautiful. Don't do it. She's an actual, real-life undercover operative. So do not take her picture and don't be like, hey, you know, on YouTube, you know, Facebook, in advance, right? So, but if we have a situation like that where that comes up, or we find out, hey, you know, we just did this spa case, we arrested 5 girls because they don't have licenses, and one of them, you know, for prostitution. We find out that they're all from the West Coast and they're just shipping them across the country. And they're just working them from West Coast to East Coast. And they're just gonna work them dry. Well, they got to stop in Chicago sometime, right? West to East, right? And we find out that they're being trafficked. Well, then we would hand it over to. So, go ahead, tell them what
So
to do.
I'm assigned, and I'm not trying to boast away from Sergeant, but he has 8 guys, we have 4, and our area of responsibility ends at Milwaukee, South Bend, Indianapolis, the Quad Cities, Wichita. So 4 of us. I'm not supposed to be as much in the field given the work and skill set that I'm assigned to, but it's inevitable. So right now my group is actually working, that's why my cell phone keeps going off, they're responding to a human smuggling load. So that's also what the 4 of us cover. So it's sex trafficking, human smuggling, both adult and children. And as been covered before, it was great. I never would have known the whole history of the laws. I'm familiar, obviously, with the federal laws because that's what we're assigned to enforce. But the biggest situation that we have is housing, first and foremost. Followed by, I am not going to trust the police because I am someone who grew up in a household where you don't trust the police. That's who took my parents away. I've never met my father. No one's ever told me they loved me before. There are so many signs and symptoms that these predators look for. I'll call them predators. Obviously, on the street, we call them pimps in law enforcement. That's just how it is, pimps. And it's also the culture of society of where we're at today. It's a compliment. You a pimp. You know, oh, so kids look up to that because we're taught to believe that that's what you should aspire to. That's what you need to. So in some ways, socially, the issue is so deep and grounded. And like that was covered before, it's trauma. These are foster children, okay? These are runaways. They don't have a stable family at home. And so when I come in, knock on the door, put them in handcuffs, now I want you to trust me, the police, someone you've never seen before in your entire life. And all the trauma and how much you've survived, your street smarts, they have more street life experience than me and my entire unit put together because of what they've survived through. So they're strong. These are tough girls, and boys too, but mostly girls that I encounter. Tough, tough girls. So for me to say, okay, you know what? You're right. I don't know what it's like to sell my body. I don't know what it's like to have my grandmother who I'm living with beat me and stab me so I had to go back to the street. I don't know what that's like. Why are you going to relate to me? And now I want you to help me prosecute your pimp. The man who told you, you're beautiful. No one's ever told me that before. I love you, you deserve the best. You know, I'm going to start by, here, let me give you a cell phone. You want some brand new clothes? Let me get your nails done. Let me get your hair done. So it's a brainwashing that takes effect of these girls. So by the time I get to them, it takes a long time to make a victim feel comfortable. The first is housing. And unfortunately, the majority of the time, the intake process, Salvation Army has always been great for U.S. citizens, and that's actually the only one that we rely on for U.S. citizens because that's it. The rest is for housing illegals, foreign nationals who are here illegally. So when I encounter U.S. citizens, my first phone call is for Salvation Army to try and get them. But I'm usually taking them to a hotel because otherwise I'm going to the homeless shelter and hoping that they'll still be there when I come back. And the hotel, okay, so they're used to their pimp providing a top-of-the-line, 4-star area, you know, much nicer than what I can provide them, okay? That's just how it is. So our biggest hurdle after the housing is getting them to trust law enforcement, getting them to trust the police. And I can tell you it's really hard because we try to make them feel safe. We have a lot to offer victims in terms of assistance. Illegals the same as well. There's immigration benefits. We can actually offer more to illegals than we can to U.S. citizens. So it's just one of those federal funding type deals. But to get them to testify so that we can end the victimization and create further victims is our biggest hurdle. So that's where we actually ask the
public, in addition to counting on trying to identify the problem, there's the Blue campaign, and that's what Homeland Security was tasked with starting out. And so you can just Google the Blue campaign on your phones or on your computers. There's a tip line in there, and that's how we get the majority of our leads. But our next step is then, when we go and find the victim, to establish a relationship with him or her and try to get them willing to testify and help save them from whatever situation they're in. And that's our biggest hurdle, first and foremost. So I'm not sure whether points also needed to be addressed. And it was great that labor trafficking was brought up, because our group also investigates that. Some of the signs and symptoms for that, if you notice any foreign nationals or any U.S. citizens, it's pretty much anyone can become a victim of labor trafficking, and it's in all those positions that were mentioned, something to look for. You only see this person at church. You know, they don't stay afterwards for coffee, cake, or tea or anything. You only see them at the store, or they have someone living at their house, but you only see them during weird hours of the night, if at all. Or you're just wondering, how come we can't have more than a couple-minute conversation? It can't just be the English barrier. They got here to the United States, didn't they? You know. So other things to look for: just withdrawn, depression, not able to be in control of their own cell phone, communications, contacts. So that's also what we investigate, is labor trafficking and human smuggling, which differs from all of this, and that people enter the United States. It's usually willingly. They hire someone to bring them across through our borders. So that's just another facet that we look for, but we've thrown a lot at you tonight, so feel free to chat me up after if you want to talk about it. But so we count on the state and locals to help assist us, because there's 4 of us for how many states, and we count on getting our leads from the public through the Blue campaign, just kind of hoping. We do spend a lot of time investigating the kooks who just, you know, they call the tip line and they're like, oh, we're not sure. Well, I always tell everyone, it's better that you call and we run every lead out than you just wonder, because you trust your gut. You get that feeling in your gut when something is wrong, and that's how you identify these other victims. Something's wrong in the way that she was talking. Something's wrong in the way that she's acting. So that's where we encourage people to call the tip line, the Blue campaign, and anything else any questions or anything we can help with after.
Tips are good, they're fantastic if you're seeing something that, you know, I mean, we have like 300 million people in the United States, or something, is that right? Am I within a couple 100,000? 300 million people in the United States. You know how many police are in the United States? Under a million. Under a million, so we're kind of outnumbered. So we really need help from the communities, you know, and if you don't want this type of thing in your community, then you need to reach out to the police, and you gotta let us know, instead of just being like, somebody else will take care of it. I'm busy. I got something else to do. I got this thing I gotta take care of. Somebody else will call it in. Somebody else will worry about it. They won't, because everybody's got the same attitude, right? But if you can help, and you know, if you can tip us off to something and you can give us some information, that would help. You know, that would help a lot. And like she said, man, we're running down leads. Honestly, we have more. We're up to here in work. Honestly, we are. You know, and it's hard to just concentrate on one thing, because we're getting pulled in a lot of different directions. You know, heroin, specifically told you need to chase down heroin. Anything that has a capital H on it, go after it. You know, why? Because people are dying. Man, 30 people over the weekend all died, right? Because they all got their heroin from the one guy that laced it with a little bit of fentanyl, so it give it a little bit of kick, right? You know, really give it a nod off. Yeah, freaking killed them. You know, yeah, they nodded off all right. You know, and then that's why you hear about stuff like that. 30 people all in one shot die. You know, if 30 people all die from going to the same prostitute, then we'd be chasing prostitutes instead of heroin, right? So think about that. Help us, please. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm suffering from jet lag and a cold, so I hope you can hear me okay. I just got off a flight from Bangkok for 16 hours in the air, and that will do it to you. So, but in any case, I hope you can hear me okay. If you can't, raise your hand and I'll speak a little louder. I'm Frank. I'll be frank with you for the next half hour. But fundamentally, my mission in life, and I've been doing this for 40 years, not to date myself, but 40 years I've been combating human trafficking. And I was blessed to marry a woman from Thailand and to go back and see her parents all the time. That's why I just got back off the flight. Thailand is the epicenter of all things evil relative to sex trafficking of children. Eastern Europe isn't much better, South America and the rest of the world either. In the old good US of A, we have our issues too, don't we? But fundamentally, that's where I got my experience. I met a girl in Chicago back in 1973, not 1873, 1973. And I flew back to Thailand to get married, and it changed my life. I got off that plane, and here's some white guy, 6'2", from a hayseed from the Midwest, going to Thailand. What else would I be going to Thailand for other than to buy sex? I was solicited 50 times. I'm over there to get married to this beautiful, wonderful, master's degree young lady and have a honeymoon and meet her parents. And every time I turned the corner, somebody was soliciting me. Boys, girls, taxi cab, hotels. I just didn't know that world existed. Not like that. So as a result, my wife and I have dedicated our lives to helping kids from Thailand particularly, but also now in the U.S. as well. And we brought back 26 kids from Southeast Asia in the last 40 years of our marriage, put them all through school. And now when I go back to Thailand, I meet them and their children, and it's quite a thing. If you give them a chance, and we kept talking about trauma here. These are traumatized. These are youth. These are 10, 7, 12-year-old kids that have been traumatized to the degree where they feel that's their station in life to sell themselves. Boys, girls, sex changes, everything you can imagine happens over there. But let's bring that international perspective to the old good US of A. The young ladies that we work with at Ann's house, after bringing 26 children back, 17 years ago I retired from the shipping industry and I became a full-time volunteer for the Salvation Army. And as a full-time volunteer, with my experience in dealing with the international clientele, the Salvation Army hired me, and I told them I would hire on at no cost. They loved it.
Good salesman.
I'll tell you what, it was a hard sell. But fundamentally, that's what I do. I brought my experience back, and we started Promise. And Promise is partnership to rescue our minors from sexual exploitation. And fundamentally, it's a task force, 3 of which, the one that operates in Chicago, one in Elgin, that we're reworking that one right now as we speak, and then we have one in Libertyville. But fundamentally what we do is we train, and we wrote a curriculum that Mary addressed earlier, we train law enforcement, social service, medical, mental health providers on how to combat the sex trafficking of children, how to identify it, how to handle it, how to report it, how to work the cases, and we primarily teach law enforcement on how to investigate CSEC cases, commercial sexual exploitation of kids. There's special techniques that are used, and we use Al Kroc, Detective Al Kroc, to do those trainings and others. But along with that awareness and the training that we do, we also prevent it from happening. So we go into the high schools, which is crucial. Actually, we need to go into the middle schools. But we start at the high schools, and we work with those kids on it. A lot of them don't know that they're being sex trafficked. And when we do those trainings, sometimes they'll talk to us, and they'll say, I'm having sex with my stepdad before class, and if I keep my mouth shut and I don't tell mom, these are U.S. citizens, our kids. I can name the high school right now. These are places that we go in and train. And if I don't open my mouth and I continue to have sex with my stepdad, then we live pretty good. If we don't, we won't. And then the stepdad lays the guilt trip on the kid, said, it's in your hands. You open your mouth up, you'll be about eating out of garbage cans again. That scenario, right? So there's all type of manipulation involved, and trauma is technically what that's called. And kids are just much more easier to manipulate than adults. And it can happen with a stepdad, it can happen in a school setting, happen with the gangs, happen with a peer, happen with mom, happen with dad. That may be their moms and dads that may have drug problems or whatever. But in either case, it's manipulation. It's trauma. Repeat after me. It's trauma bonding. That's exactly what this is. No other way to explain it. PTSD, trauma bonding. And that's what happens. And so we train in the high schools kids that are being trauma bonded to recognize that. And then come to us and disclose, and then we handle it. Excuse me, we properly handle it. So no one gets hurt, the child doesn't get further traumatized, or the situation worse. And then we, in addition to the prevention and the intervention, we also do the same thing for hotels. Because a lot of this happens with the hotel operators. So we train them on HALT, hotel and law enforcement training. The last thing we do, in addition to all these, awareness, prevention, intervention, what do you do with the kids? And we have the solution. A lot of times in life, it's difficult to find a solution, but I think we have, in fact I know we have the one that works. And it's called long-term trauma-based residential care. Not a short-term shelter, that works. Get a kid off the street for a short period of time and getting them patched up and getting them cared for, that works to a degree. But then send them back to the pimp or back to the environment they came from. Who can hold that off? I couldn't fend that off.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
How many beds would you need to cover the problem?
Well, we estimate there's 300,000 kids in the U.S., up to 300,000. They're involved in some way,
Well,
shape.
I was looking at this Ann's house that holds 8.
Right.
How many more beds would you need for
I'm
the?
answering your question.
Okay, but I meant for the area that this covers.
There's 300,000 approximately in the U.S. In Illinois, we estimate there's about 18,000. These are just, and again, let's not get too hung up on numbers. Nobody really knows. Pimps don't, hey, how many girls have you pimped out last night? Generally, the police would like that. We'd all like that. They generally don't stand up. Maybe some of them are stupid enough to do that. Don't stand up and say, yes, we do. But we're thinking you need 100 beds through Illinois to cover the issue. Long-term trauma-based,
Of course.
not just short-term shelters, things like that. So the key, and we have an 80% success rate getting into house. Now, what we call success is breaking the trauma bond. And that is so they no longer think of themselves in that way. Or they're not bonded to somebody who's in complete control of their lives. They have some degree of independence, self-assuredness, where they can function life properly without feeling that that's their station in life. And Ann's House has been doing that since 2010, and it's comprehensive care, and what we mean by that, they live there 24/7. We operate with 13 staff, 24/7, 365, never shut down, complete professional care. And that's schooling, that's vocational training. And when they come to us, and they come to 12 years of age, we have 2 that are 10 in Indianapolis, so we can't take them yet. But they come to us at 12, 13 years of age, through various and sundry means, through law enforcement, through social service, through referrals, parents sometimes themselves, sometimes even the kids themselves call us. We get tips. But when we get them, they must agree to want to be there too. There has to be a degree of cooperation within the program because we're not a lockdown turnkey facility. You have to volunteer to be there. And that's not so easy when you have a pimp controlling you, or you have a pimp trying to put a girl in your program as a bottom girl, so that she controls other girls in the program, and he has 8 or 10 girls to choose from instead of 1, right? So they have to be highly trained staff, long-term, and generally our young ladies are there for 2 years, up to 4 years. We have one young lady that's been there 5 years. And age means nothing with this population. We have 20-year-olds that act like 7 or 8 emotionally, and we have all mixes in between. It depends on the degree of their trauma, when it happened, what type of trauma, and how they react to it. And one of the girls that came in that brings to mind right now, I'll mention her as R, not her name, because we're on film here. But R came at 12. She was from Des Plaines, Illinois. She was trafficked, and she was from Vietnam originally. So brought in under false pretenses, under false everything, and we determined that she was being trafficked in a trailer out in Des Plaines. And she ran away from that trailer and tried to enroll herself in high school. And they said, at 12, don't you think you're a little bit young to be going to high school? And the next thing they know, the police were called, FBI was called. This was several years ago. And then we were notified of her. And then she came into Ann's house, severely traumatized. Genital mutilation. These are our kids now. These aren't kids from Bangkok. These are U.S. citizens. Branded. And I don't mean just branded with a tattoo. I mean branded on her butt with a branding iron. And I'm not you don't have to make this stuff up. It's so horrific. These are our citizens. In her case, she was an unaccompanied minor, but most of them are our citizens of the United States. And they come to us in all shapes and sizes, but they're just kids. And once we give them the type of trauma care that we provide, and when they fall, we pick them up. When they run, we go get them. We personally don't, with the officers and police that we work with. When they cut themselves, we take them to the West Suburban Hospital, we get them patched up or bring them back. When they have eating disorders, most of them do, we get that dealt with. But you can't do that overnight. That takes years. But when they blossom, that makes all this hell that we live in worth what we do. Because it just takes one of them to make it. And 80% of our kids make it. Through time. And when they run, that's not a failure, that's an expectation. And when they cut themselves, we understand that. You're not going to get kicked out of our program for cutting yourself. Not what she's been through. We expect that. So we will fix that. And the door is open. And we bring them back in. And so if we have 100 beds in Illinois, and you've committed to that, and I thank you so much. I've waited my whole life for this. But thank you for your question. We have a lot of work to do. But it is a solution. It's an expensive one, but really not. When you get a kid, you can help them, and they can make it life. We have 2 young ladies that just graduated from, I can't say the name of the high school because that'll give the location of the home. Frank Lloyd Wright area, right? Ernest Hemingway, but I'll never tell you the name of the town. That's a very good, I couldn't graduate from that high school. That's a college prep high. And here they are going there, all F's when they enter, and A's and B's, and just got awarded by the mayor, a special award for academic achievement and scholarship. This is a girl that came from hell just 3 years ago. I am not making this up. This is the real deal. It works. So thanks again for your commitment. One day, I was sitting in my office and I had this idea, and I'll leave you with this. And I said, I'm not shy about this stuff. I said, I have to open a home. And I was sitting there, and I was selling it to everybody. I spent 27 years in the shipping business, selling and marketing, right? So anybody that would listen to me, and most of the people wouldn't, and I still went after them. I said, I know this works. My phone rang in my little office at Salvation Army, which I'm a volunteer. I wonder if I got charged for that or not. But I pick up the phone and she says, are you Frank? And I said, it depends on who's calling. And she says, I'm Ann. And I love your linear approach. I love the fact that it's not theory. You're going to do something. And I like the approach. And it's very goal focused. And I think it would work. Would you accept $1,200,000 from me? And just like your commitment, I said yes. I thought on it for a while. Now, wait a minute. Is this my brother-in-law? And then she says, well, can you meet me at the, she said, can you meet me at the Sushi Kushi restaurant? I'm talking to her, and I'm looking on the internet, right? Sushi Kushi, that's gotta be massage. This is my brother-in-law. Jim, I'm gonna give you. Well, Sushi Kushi is a legitimate restaurant in a beautiful area of town, very expensive area of town. She met me, wrote out a check, it didn't bounce, and we opened Ann's house. And I was just talking to Eric, coming in here. People are good. You want to help. A lady just gave me $20,000 tonight before I came in here. So that whether I have a cold or not, all of a sudden I feel like I could run a marathon. I mean, this lady gave $20,000. Can't tell you her name. I could show you the part of the check I'm so excited about. But people like you that want, and not $20,000, $5, $10, we are totally, exclusively, 100% privately funded. No federal money, no state money, no county money. They don't have any money anyway. Don't put that on campus. But bottom line is, people like you that want to help. These are our children. These are kids from the U.S. And so that we have a solution. We'd love to have your help with it. So with that, can we run the video, or is it too late?
How long is that?
5 minutes.
Sure.
I want to introduce you to some of these kids.
How much does it cost on average to house them?
But we amazingly operate the program. Okay. We opened at $550,000 a year, and now we're operating at just over $400,000 a year. And we have 10 to 15 kids go through the program a year. Some are there for shorter periods of time.
Somebody stole it, man.
So the state pays around $300 a day for the same services. Ours is about $100 a day per shot. Yes. And a lot of it has to do with Salvation Army. People come in and do things for us for free. So if that helps. Did you, if we can't run this, then we can't, but I don't know what happened.
Press the F function, the F button that sometimes
Do you know how to do it? You want to come up?
I might, but
That was working before.
okay, I think
It's off.
I can tell you, the girls make bracelets. I'm wearing one of them.
The signal's off.
I know there's no signal going into it.
Is the computer off?
Where's the plug into the
Thank you. Appreciate the help. I've got all these. That's not this. a video about the actual girls inside.
You want to tell us about the girls who can't get this work?
Fundamentally, if you go to our website, if you go to sapromise.org, sapromise.org, and you click on Anne's House, you'll see the video.
Okay, all right.
Hey, you got yourself some. Yay! Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tap the power button to his computer.
Wow. I guess each one's different.
Here we go.
Live from NBC5, this is the NBC5 News at 10.
You may not realize it, but every 24 hours, thousands of women and girls are trafficked or prostituted in the Chicago area. The numbers are staggering, but getting out of that life is very difficult. Experts say the trauma is intense and there are very few services available to help. We found one of them run by the Salvation Army.
One top, one bottom, one purse.
They look and act like your average teenagers, shopping.
These have a full color.
But it took work for these girls to get to this kind of normal. They are each victims of sex trafficking.
After I got raped, then I started to learn about prostitution.
Jackie, we'll call her, was 13 when she got raped.
I was staying with mostly men who would not let me go to sleep when I wanted to and make me have sex with them.
At 18, the girl we'll call Tina, a runaway, was also raped, and then moved from house to house, being prostituted by gang members for survival.
And they're like, you kind of don't have a choice because if you want to stay in our hood, you owe us taxes, you got to pay us.
Jackie, now just 16, was used by 2 different pimps, managing to escape the last one.
I have to wait till he gets deeper and say, because you just moving and she wake up. And he had guns, so of course I'm going to be scared.
She's still fearful he'll come after her.
He's capable of anything. Police don't scare him, no nuts scare him.
Jackie and Tina are safe right now. They're in a long-term residential facility in a home hidden in plain sight in the Chicago area suburb. It's run by the Salvation Army exclusively for sex trafficking victims. It's called Anne's House. Now, it looks pretty homey here. Is that part of the way you have it set up? Intended to be
Comfortable. Make it a comfortable environment to make them feel at home.
Despite the fact that 16,000 to 25,000 women and girls are trafficked in Chicago every day, Anne's House is one of only 2 places in the state offering sex trafficking victims long-term residential care. According to this national survey, there are only 12 beds in the entire state. Anne's House has 8 of them, and experts say sex trafficking victims need specialized care.
The things that you have to deal with, flashbacks and nightmares and defiance.
People in prostitution have rates of post-traumatic stress disorder that are almost as high as people in combat war.
Here they receive intensive counseling. They learn life skills.
We may have girls who don't know how to use household utensils because they've never done it before.
They go to school and get constant support. There are rules and structure.
They come into a place that is safe, very structured, where what's expected of them is really clear.
Ann Bent, the Ann in Ann's House, donated $1.2 million to fund the program in 2009.
What they get in the home is a true home.
She sees it working. Right now, Jackie is a sophomore in high school who loves art.
Do you see yourself going to college? Yes, I'm going to college for sure, there's no doubt.
Without Ann's House?
I would probably be in jail right now. I'm not even gonna lie. I could have ended up dead.
But this year, Tina graduated high school and is focusing on college.
It's like God spoke to me and said that my life was going to change for the better, and this place represents that. I'm very lucky. Her Ann's House.
More services for sex trafficking victims may soon be on the way. The Chicago Alliance Against Sexual Exploitation has pushed legislation to fine pimps, johns, and traffickers and use that money to help fund services like those at Ann's House. The measure passed last week and now awaits the governor's signature.
Really important story. Thanks, Mary. Fast-moving story.
Thank you. Sorry for the delay. Thank you. It works. It works. There's an example of how it works with the kids. We are opening another home. I'm back in a jet again the 1st, and I'm going to California, and we're going to open a home out there, exactly like this one. Illinois, in Orange County, and it's Vanguard University, Salvation Army, together. And I'm just elated because they get it, and they've been out there. This will be the 3rd time, and we're really going to go for it. So we're really ecstatic about that. But we need some more in Illinois. Think it over. She'll need some help financially.
Did I write my check? Who do I write it for?
Salvation Army Promise Program. Keep the promise. Large checks are most appreciated. Thank you. Sorry about my call. Thank you.
We also have a guest. We have an aide from Congressman Bill Foster's office, Carol Cheney. Would you like to say a few words?
Hi, I'm Carol Cheney with Congressman Foster, as was mentioned, and I just wanted to note that if you have concerns about this at the federal level, please let your representative know. That's the only way to get federal legislation passed, is that the constituents say what they want to their elected representative. Congressman Foster actually is on the Human Trafficking Caucus. He has supported the legislation in the past. It's a new session now. HR 66, I think the 466 that was mentioned, 466. If you would like him to support that, please call our office or call your respective representative. It's extremely important. On the issue, I was just talking with a friend, a lot of these children who come into sex trafficking actually have been sexually abused as children by family members. And so I think it's a larger societal issue that needs to be addressed as well. I know this issue is being addressed in Will County. There's a children's advocacy center that deals and helps children who have been victims of sexual abuse. And I don't know if you've seen much, but I know they just recently got a dog that sniffs out the electronics, because a lot of people like pornography that they keep on flash drives and their cell phones. Will County got one of the few electronic sniffing dogs in the country to help battle that. So as the means grows, the surveillance methods need to grow as well. But please do contact our offices if you have any concerns about any of these issues. And Mayor, you were talking about the areas. We actually have been monitoring the human trafficking issue across the 11th Congressional District, which is the district that Representative Foster covers. And that ranges from Aurora to Joliet. And there have been either victims or perpetrators in Romeoville, Lisle, Aurora, Oswego, North Aurora, Bolingbrook, and Joliet. So it is something that, and Downers was mentioned too, it is something that is spanning our region, and it's affecting our children and our families.
What was the HR bill? What number?
It's 466, and that was the one that was recently introduced. And I'm going to take a closer look at that as well, but that would be the one this term. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to open it up to questions, but there's one thing that you can all do right now. There is an anti-trafficking hotline, and if you have your cell phones with you, you can enter it right now into your contact list. And I would suggest you use a title like trafficking hotline so you know exactly where to find it. If you want to do that, I'll read the number out to you. It's also on handouts in the back. So do you want to do that? Okay, tell me when you're ready.
Ready.
Okay, the number is 888-373-7888. I can say it again. It's 888-373-7888. And if you want to learn a little bit more, that includes some personal stories, Made in the USA, The Sex Trafficking of America's Children by Elisa Jortheim, and have your hankies ready. It tells personal stories of kids who've been trafficked, including a young man as a runaway, as a teenager, because boys do get into this too. And they don't have the kind of facilities like the girls have because people don't know about it. They don't like to come forward. Boys are warriors, not victims. So let's open it to questions. Yes?
I have a question. I mean, you were talking about these young girls needing money to support babies, to pay the rent. Okay, what can they do to earn money if they're not doing prostitution?
Oftentimes, they just don't have the life skills that they need to be able to do it.
Well, I know, is part of the stuff of getting them out of that lifestyle. I would think that would be a problem.
Oh, I love your question. Back there, we have soap that is made by Ann's House.
Oh, okay.
And one of the many things that we teach them to do is make beautiful hand soaps, 12 fragrances. And we've sold over $50,000 worth of hand soap made exclusively by the young ladies in Ann's House under the tutelage of a professional soap maker. And if you go to saprowers.org, you can buy hand soap anywhere in the continental U.S., including Hawaii and Guam, and we will deliver it via UPS to your door. How's that? And I've got samples of Ann's House soap back there for you. If you want to give a donation, we sell them for $5 a bar. Or if you're not inclined to do that, please take a sample and go on out and be an advocate and sell Ann's House soap for us. It's amazing. The kids love it. We teach them a business, how to be entrepreneurs. They don't have to sell themselves. And I'll tell you, they weren't believers until that first $1,000 worth of soap came in. And then all of a sudden, we did this. You've got to show them to believe. And now they believe. And they make jewelry too, but the soap is the big deal. And it's selling all over the place. So please take a sample. If you want to give a donation, or if you want to give a big donation, that's okay too.
I'm not a plant.
Okay.
Do you have a container for donations?
I'll make one.
Say no, you
I can put a little cup.
We did a really big one.
Yeah.
It is a social issue, and because we're asked this all the time too, and most of these girls are coming from broken households, and as you know, they experience runaways, but they're in the foster care system. I always recommend that people look into their local foster care groups to see if there's something they can do to help. Be a mentor. If you can't give financially, if you can give your time. But these girls, and the majority of actually people in crime who turn to a criminal lifestyle, have had time in the foster care system. They don't come from stable households, so just having someone, you know, who has their best interest in heart, telling them that they deserve better, that they can be better, because you have to get them willing into the program, into that wonderful program. And if they say no and they pound sand, we don't see them again until they're dead on the street or they get arrested again. Because to go be willing into that program, they'll tell me yes, they're willing, and then I go to pick them up the next day and they're gone. Because that's not the life that they know. So I think it's at the beginning, because it's a social problem. This is a deep social issue that there's no easy answer for that we can tell you. But I don't know, I always recommend getting them when they're young, because they're in the system when they're young, from a very, very young age.
Once we get them there though, we need mentors, we need tutors. And you know what the biggest, and we deal with a lot of survivors, and they tell me the most influential thing, the therapy was great. EMDR, neurocognitive therapy, that was all wonderful. The professional counseling that we provide, that's great. The most influential thing in their life is the shiny women, the shiny people. You're the shiny people. You're the women of accomplishment with the Gucci bags, as they say, right? Or whatever. And you dress real nice. And in their mind's eye, you're coming to see them. This is survivors telling me this, right? And it was probably the most influential thing in their life. And you think you're sitting there, these kids are probably going to think, who am I coming down here to see them, right? they're thinking just the opposite. It's highly transformative. So if people that are interested, let me know, because we're always looking for mentors and tutors.
Nancy, you had a question.
This is for Frank and the undercover agent. If when the girls come to you, they are either pregnant or have a child already,
Right.
how do you take care of that situation?
When we experience it, DCFS has already been well involved, and it's not successful. That's just how it is. They're usually in kinship foster care or fictive kin, which is a relation, like family relation somehow, or somehow they know about it before, but it's not successful. It's not a situation that we can return them to. We deal with more the emergency. This is immediate. We have to remove them from this harmful situation and their kids, because it's not just the victim who's in foster care, it's also their children are still in foster care too. But honestly, our first and foremost thing, our easiest thing to access to, because there's an intake process involved and the willingness to be committed to a program and opening for bed space available. A lot of the times I'm told to send them to the homeless shelter, which is very sad and horrible, and it's very hard to do, because otherwise they're returning back to their foster homes. It takes DCFS a long time to find another foster home, especially for a mother-child. And foster homes that are available, that are good, that are therapeutic, are even fewer far between. They're going to take a mother and child, not split them up. So it's, I don't have a positive answer for you. I don't have any, it's not a very positive subject, but that's what we do. And we try to talk to them, maintain a relationship so we can get them into some type of program that they'll commit to. But that is the biggest hurdle that I face, is trying to get these girls committed and willing to join the program, to testify against the offender so we can prosecute the offender.
Nancy, did you have something you wanted to say before? I thought I saw your hand. No, well, I'll let others ask questions. Okay.
I belong to a very interesting recovery faith-based program. And in my opinion, that gives a lot of hope. I'm a nurse midwife, and it is a first responder group. I don't know if you know anything about it. It's called Celebrate Recovery. I find it very interesting and very helpful, but occasionally we get a very different type of person that comes in that puzzles me, that is not really telling the truth over and over and over again. And they are hiding certain facts, and it's obvious that they cannot, they're frozen because they cannot trust enough people to probably give away what's going on at home. And one of the questions I have is, how can one get involved if you just have a idea that something's going on? How much involvement can you do with the police if there's a tip, if you've just got a tip and you've been working them for 2 years, and there's all the symptoms there of self-harm, etc., and you need to get them out of the place. Like, for instance, they even stayed over at my place and showed me bruises and stuff, but they wouldn't take that final jump to say, I want to get out of there. And, you know, how can we just bridge that gap? Is it possible to do surveillance or just, you know, a tip?
If I may,
yeah.
We have professional outreach workers
Yeah.
that are trained to really work that and manipulate that situation.
Right.
Where, because you can do a lot of harm there in a real hurry, right?
Right.
Ask the wrong question, do the wrong thing. So we prefer that you give the information to us, and we'll talk to, I'll give you the number to call, outreach worker to intervene, right?
Mm-hmm.
A trained CSEC professional outreach worker who will then liaison between police if necessary,
Right.
FBI, whomever, right? And because sometimes if you try to handle that, or even my staff aren't trained to handle that, that's so sensitive, right? So we use the outreach program professionals that can deal with that. And then they'll assess it, disclose, if it's a disclosure involved or whatever, how to handle it, and make sure that the victim doesn't get further harm.
Okay, so how does that happen? So that a person like me,
Right.
who is a highly trained medical person, nurse midwife, at master's degree level,
You get,
How does I bridge that gap without letting the confidentiality of the person, even though this is a volunteer position,
right,
and they have come because it is an EMS situation, it's an emergency situation, where they just walk into an environment, have got the information from somewhere, if they want help. In fact, sometimes the parents drop them off at the door, but the reason they're doing it is out of guilt and shame. They're not doing it, and they're detracting from what's actually happening in the home.
right.
So once, and those are the cases that I like, because being a nurse midwife, I can delve a little deeper in terms of psychology, but because of the environment, you cannot really go too far. You can just leave a tip, because it's, it's a faith-based, as it were, walking program. I want to be able to know. We do have a social worker in my particular place. And so the connection might take place there, but I would like to know specifically who to talk to regarding that, because I think there is a case at the moment that I would like to discuss, which is why I'm here, frankly.
Have you asked your social worker? Have you talked to your social worker?
Yes, it's in discussion at the moment. It's the only reason I'm here.
I was a social worker in schools and in some hospitals, and but I'm not saying I know specifically about this. But what I'm saying is sometimes you can talk to somebody and say, I know, so I think you need more help than I can give you. I would like your permission to refer you to such and such, and have them contact you and see if they can provide more help than I can provide.
Oh, no, it's too late. The family have already shut that side down.
No, I don't understand the family. I'm talking about the person.
Yes, but the person is completely vulnerable. You don't understand, yes. Once they come to this trust issue, I'm seeing all sides here, and it's extremely clear, because I've been with this organization for 2 solid years, and I've worked internationally, like you. I was born in Tanzania, actually. So basically, I understand that. I worked in Europe, South Africa, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, and so I understand some of this human trafficking. But it's the connection. How do you...
Yeah, there's no clear-cut answer that we can give you that I can say, just call this number and we'll send someone magic and then she'll trust and start talking. That's the battle that we face, and for criminal prosecution as far as that's concerned. And then in addition to finding long-term therapeutic care. There is no easy answer. It is what she suggested. I have someone who I'd like you to speak with. When it comes over to law enforcement, I try to put on my kid gloves as best as I can. I'm not a trained therapeutic professional, and I don't know, some people say I'm aggressive. How can I be aggressive? I'm 5 foot, But anyway, so I might come across really strong, so I try my best.
Like a honey badger.
So that's that. So, and then girls can relate to me. I'm the only female in my group, so it's bad for me, and so, there's no easy answer to give you. Yeah, you can provide information anonymously on those tip lines, but, we would prefer that we get someone who already established a relationship to do that introduction so we can do that. As far as law enforcement, that's what our answer is. I can't really speak for the therapeutic side of the house because I'm not trained in that area.
Yeah, we have no problem with the person concerned. It's the parent. And in my opinion, it is the family that has caused the problem.
Yeah.
And there is no doubt.
Right.
Yes.
You walk on landmines with that, you have to be so careful.
Okay, I think there are other people with questions. Can we, and I think, Carol, did you have something? I think Nancy had something first.
No, go ahead. I have a question. You had mentioned going into the schools, and specifically high schools, but the need for it younger. What do you say in the schools, and how do you get buy-in from the schools for a presentation on something sensitive like that?
Oh, well, the first thing is better not be sex education, right? So we don't go there, right? This is CSEC training about sex trafficking per se, and we've been fortunate to ride the coattails of CIS. Communities and schools. They're fantastic. They're in 180 schools around, and they love what we do, and they've got a great track record with the schools, so we ride their coattails in. and get in and do the training, as opposed to going to board, school board and things like that. And it's worked out beautifully.
Are you trying for younger? Because it seems like prevention is really, you know, and
Yes,
it's,
we are trying.
but is it hard to do?
Well, I wouldn't say it hard. It's just, our curriculum had to be adjusted for middle school, for actually, we want to do elementary is what you really need, because that's when they start getting exposed to pornography. So we had to adjust our curriculum a little bit. So that was the main holdup. There wasn't access for the younger kids, so, but that's where it's really needed now.
Nancy? Okay, I will ask the question, because a hotline was mentioned, and we also are talking about tips, but what kind of tips? I mean, what should we be looking for? What should raise our antenna? Because I'm not as sensitized to this whole area as others.
So in law enforcement, it's going to be your local residents. People are shocked when it's right next door across the street. You're going to see a high rate of traffic. This is the same with any type of narcotics, any gang activity, anything else. High traffic, lots of cars coming and going, 10, 15 minutes, then they leave. Lots of people coming with lots of luggage. It doesn't make any sense. Females in particular. A high rate of females at the house. What the hell are all these females doing here? Teenagers specifically, that type of thing. But just high traffic and trusting your gut. If you get that gut feeling, you're usually right, because that's what we use to survive. So just be aware of your surroundings. Know your neighbors. Who is this guy living next to you? Know what I mean? Like, you question that. I'm not saying call up because somebody's ethnic, because we get that all the time too. But you know what I mean? That kind of just being aware of your surroundings, knowing who your neighbors are, knowing what they do, and paying attention. That's all. That's how you make your community better.
And we
One other
have,
thing.
Mary,
The camera is off if he wants to
this or not?
Well, what I had here is the same thing you have. This is
Tell
from
him that,
Shared Hope
yeah.
International, and it's a handout with warning signs to recognize pimps and traffickers, and warning signs that indicate need traffickers.
Well, specifically the children, C-sex victims, we have a card for you, wallet size. And on this card, it has a number to call, but it also has identifiers, the key identifiers. And police carry this sometimes in their wallets. Social workers carry this around. And so we've got one for each of you. And it's the real identifiers, subject to not just one of them, but a combination of a few of them that are real good indicators. Yes, they're real good indicators of commercial sexual exploitation of kids, okay? And then there's a resource number on there as well. So this may be of some help to you, okay? If a minor is accompanied by a controlling third party, well, that can be a lot of people and a lot of kids. But these other things, in addition to it, lying about their age, they've been taught to do that. They have to do that. And their well-being, the way they look, the way the paranoia. A lot of kids are very paranoid, more than just a teenager being upset about their acting. Okay, this is real serious stuff, right? Runaway or homeless, that's 90% of who we deal with, right? On runaway status. So look those over, and please use them. Fair enough?
Yes.
I'm trying to get my head around your job, that you have like 8 states and 4 people.
No, there's other offices. That's just where it ends. But yeah, we're like the only group that's solely dedicated to.
So how do you get a caseload? I mean, you can't have that many people. I mean, how
I'm
do
pretty
they
awesome
call
at
you and
everything.
they- You're wonderful.
No, it's exactly, that's the whole point. It's the manpower, but there's not a lot, I mean, we're at the federal level, so we rely on a lot of help from the state and locals, but yeah, our caseload varies. There's a lot of homeland security investigations. We investigate federal crimes, so it's everything from cyber crimes to weapons of mass destruction, terrorism, narcotics, immigration, there's a myriad, and we're also tasked to other groups at the same time as well, given your skill set. That's just kind of how it is, but usajobs.gov, if you know somebody who's interested, there's going to be
There's a freeze. There's a hiring freeze, though.
There's a description, yep, descriptions are on there, so.
Think of the caseload like water. Once it's over your head, then you know you're almost there. When the wave crashes down on you, then you know you're there.
I just wanted to ask you, in your work, so who do you represent in your legal work?
We represent victims of trafficking.
Okay.
Part of our last project, yeah.
All right, so are you doing the civil claims for the funds?
Well, we haven't actually done civil claims for funds, but we'll represent them. I mean, they could be having a variety of different issues. It could be expungement of their criminal record, it could be a family issue, it could be consumer issue, housing issue, consumer debt in terms of the trafficker had them rack up debt on their card, just a variety of different legal issues that come into play.
And how do you get your funding?
It's a pretty wide range, individual support, businesses, church support, a few foundations. We get one federal grant for a low-income taxpayer clinic that we run, but otherwise that's the only federal money that we receive.
Do you have law students that help?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're always looking for law students. We're looking to hire a bilingual staff attorney if anybody knows, as well as a bilingual tech person.
Share it, if you could share it, I can get it out.
Okay, good. Thank
We
you.
have some business cards back there too, don't you?
I have them in my pocket, I'm gonna put them back.
Okay, so take this business card that you can help
I'd
out.
like one for our organization.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a lot of handouts in the back about the topics that were discussed tonight, as well as the business cards. So, feel free to take the stuff.
Is there a second, I have one question. Is there a second Ann's house or something like that on the way? Because it seems like you have a lot more people who need, placement than the vets that you currently have. And do you turn them away? What do you, just go to different agencies?
We are real proud to say that 5 years ago, before Ann's House, we were the only one long-term trauma-based residential program in Illinois. And since then, as Eric had alluded to, there are 4 programs now. Moody is opening one, and this is a long-term trauma-based residential home concept as well. And Cherish Home is open now, and they're operating. Again, it's long-term perspective with the Cassandra Marr. And then the Refuge for Women, and that's for adult women, and that's operational now and doing very well. So Illinois we need a lot more, but we're making progress. Just like Eric indicated earlier too, Illinois has a lot to be proud. Sometimes we don't have a lot to be proud of. Sometimes,
Well, I
right?
have to say, just to interject, we did invite staff from Peter Roscom's office. They were not unable to come, but we know that it is a bipartisan issue that both sides of the aisle care about, and I know that he has support. You're here. That's what I thought I recognized you from. Well, then, do you want to say anything about the work that that Congressman Roscom has done on this issue?
Yeah, I mean, similar to Carol's
Please
point.
stand up and introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Anna Kubas, and I'm the Deputy District Director for Congressman Peter Roscom. And similar to Carol's point, if there's any information that you'd like to pass along to our office, HR 466, I wasn't aware of it, so thank you for mentioning it earlier. It's definitely something I'll be bringing up to Mr. Roscom. But if there's anything else that anybody ever wants to contact our office, please feel free to call, email, anyways, a way to contact us. So thank you.
Thank you. Hallelujah, Illinois, because Illinois is leading the nation on anti-trafficking legislation.
Wow. Well, we did contact Douglas' office and Durbin's office. I didn't hear back, and I don't know if any from there. And we did contact state legislators. And because today was the day that Ron was doing his budget talk, they could not come and they could not send their aides. That does not mean they are not interested. They are. So, yeah, we did contact all our locals, and if they couldn't come, they couldn't come. So I'm glad the ones that did.
And the state league will be on top of when the report comes out from the human trafficking task force, and see what we could be supporting in terms of additional legislation in Illinois.
Yeah, and I did contact 2 of the state senators who are on that task force, and that's why they're not there. But they very graciously helped me with stuff I needed to know for this. So. Do we you have more questions?
I think we gotta wrap it up.
Okay,
Yeah.
then, yeah, our time's up. Thank you so much for coming.